Out of sight, out of mind is typical for a lot of things, but not when it comes to commercial real estate. There are a large number of investors who are actually not local to the place where they actually own the property. So let's start off with a quick story. So there was an investor who had done a whole lot of research. They weren't from Houston. They had been researching Houston for the past 8 months. They had done all their due diligence. They had their capital ready. They were working with someone who was supposed to be helping them purchase a property. And then by the end of it, they got left out of the deal. As in, the person that was supposed to have been helping them ended up actually taking the deal for themselves. Now you can imagine that in this situation, the investor was pissed, for lack of a better word, right? They had spent the time, put the energy into something, thought they had something great, and then it was just ripped out from up under them. And unfortunately, that's the story for a lot of folks who try to invest from a place that they aren't local to. But we're going to talk today about how you can make that situation work for you, some best practices, some mistakes that a lot of people make, and what to look out for when you do it. So stay tuned. Like with anything worth doing, there are going to be risk involved, right? But the risk in this case isn't the Houston market. It's not buying in Houston. It's not buying out of state, period. The risk is in the information that you have. And relying on information solely based on the listing is not going to get you very far. You have to remember that the information that's provided there is literally from the person that's trying to sell it. So there are little things that are outside of the listing that can really help you to make better, sound, and more informed decisions. A few things to keep in mind there are stuff like the trajectory of the submarket, right? Like, what does it really look like once you drill down into it? Even some deferred maintenance that may be hiding behind like really good pictures. So it is possible to get catfished by photos and think that something is in a lot better shape than it actually is. And then you have tenant relationships and vacancies nearby that can also contribute to the overall picture of what a property really looks like and is way beyond what's going to be included in that listing. So for example, I ran the numbers on a property near downtown recently and everything checked out. The NOI, the DSCR, the cap rate, everything was looking great on the property. But when you really look at the property, and if you know the Houston market, then you know that they are planning to expand the freeway here in a couple years near downtown. And that's exactly where their property laid at. And so eventually those properties will be demolished. And so if you don't know little things like that, you can look at a listing and think, oh, this is great, the numbers check out. But when you really know the full picture, that makes a huge difference for you. So 5 mistakes that out-of-state buyers typically make. Number 1 is going to be trusting the seller's pro forma just blindly, right? What you really want to do is make sure that you run your own numbers, do your own NOI calculation, because a lot of times they will assume a full occupancy and the highest rent rates, and that's not always the case. So make sure that you verify those things on your own. I actually have a video where I ran the numbers and did an example of an actual property that was for sale here in Houston. So make sure you go check that one out, and I will link it here for you guys. Mistake number 2 is going to be trying to skip that in-person visit before you go under contract. That just creates so much more peace of mind when it comes to purchasing this property. And the properties are going to be $1 million, $5 million, $10 million. And so you really want to have at least laid eyes on the property before you start signing paperwork for it. And now I have become very good at a FaceTime showing. That is, we're going to leave that as an option B as opposed to putting that as the first option. Mistake number 3 is not hiring a professional. Yes, there are a lot of people out there who are experienced in commercial real estate, but having someone who is specific to the area where you are purchasing is going to make all the difference. Knowing the different submarkets, knowing some of those niche things about a neighborhood is really going to make a difference in your experience. So you want to have somebody advocating for you who can advise you, who is also familiar with the area that you're trying to purchase in. Mistake number 4 is going to be underestimating the amount of time that you need for a deal to get from start to finish. So there's a long time for due diligence that is required, and a lot of people don't always plan for that. So if we're at 60 to 90 days just to get through a due diligence period, you really need to factor that into your expectations and what will happen throughout the process of you purchasing. And mistake number 5 applies to number 3 as well, but it's so important that it warrants being said again. You really need to have the right people supporting you and advising you in this process. Houston specifically is a very large place, and so a 2-mile, 3-mile, 4-mile radius can make a big difference in a submarket, in the cap rate, and in the numbers that will affect your success in this process. So please make sure you have credible, educated people who are supporting you and advising you throughout this entire process. So now if you come to me and you say, okay, Lexi, I know what some of the risks are. I know what to look out for. I'm committed to doing this. What is the process? What is step 1? So step 1 is going to be getting your financing in order. And that's going to mean applying with the lender, determining what your loan to value or your down payment capability is, and then also having them run a few different scenarios so that you're familiar with what a mortgage payment would look like or a loan structure would look like on a commercial property. And if you don't have a lender to reach out to, I have some recommendations, so feel free to leave a comment and I'll shoot those over to you. Step number 2 is going to be defining, or at a minimum, narrowing down your asset class, because that's really going to affect how and what you evaluate when it comes to a property. And if you need help with that, an advisor should be able to do that as well. And speaking of advisors, that is step number 3, to get an advisor who is familiar with not only the market that you're in, but also the asset class as well. And so make sure you ask them questions about things to look out for, what their experience has been, so that you can get a good understanding of whether or not they're going to be somebody that can help you through this process. Step number 4 is going to be making that in-person visit to any property that you are considering purchasing. If you're considering putting in a contract, you need to make sure that you are able to lay eyes on this property beforehand. And step 5 ties back into that advisory category, but you need to make sure that you are doing all of the due diligence, right? So we need rent rolls, we need operating expenses, we need structural inspections, we need environmental inspections. All of that plays into what we decide to offer on the property and how we run the numbers and what all would really make sense for a specific property. So that due diligence is not something that you can skip. It is a must do in this process. If I haven't said it enough, I'm going to say it again. You need a local Houston area advisor to be advising you throughout this process. So here's some questions to ask of that advisor, and just make sure that you guys are on the same page, that you feel confident in their ability, and to get you guys to the finish line. So question number 1 is, what percentage of your deals are going to be on the buyer side transactions? And whether that number is high or low really isn't important. What's important is that they have done some transactions, right? Because maybe they're more experienced on the seller side, but that could also be of benefit to you because they have insight into how sellers think, and that can be an advantage to a buyer. Question number 2 to ask is, what was the last deal that you advised the client to walk away on? You don't want an advisor who is always a yes person. Oh yeah, sure, do this. Oh yeah, sure, do that. You want people who are going to push back on you based on facts and based on their experience. So question number 3 is, what submarkets are you active in right now? Because if they're active in a warehouse submarket and you want to do a restaurant, that might not be a connect that will work for you. So make sure you have some kind of insight into what their experience is. And then number 4 is walk you through their due diligence process. What does that look like for them? What steps are they taking? What numbers are they running? How are they ensuring that your capital is in good hands? So some red flags to look out for when it comes to your advisor. Number 1 is going to be fake urgency. Yes, some things do require a sense of urgency, but creating it for no other reason than to feel important or look important is definitely going to be a red flag. Another red flag is going to be representing both sides. Now, there are some agents that do this very well, but in my experience, there's always one side that feels like they didn't get your best, that the other side got some kind of an advantage because you were working both sides. So make sure to look out for that. Also, vague answers. If they can't give you specific answers to some of your questions, then that should raise a red flag for you. And then a reluctancy to share, right? So none of this is a secret. So if they are reluctant to share, that's something to kind of put into thought as to whether or not you want to work with them. Now, some green flags to make sure that you are looking out for as well is that they will show you some deals that they passed on, so that they're not just that yes person that we talked about, that they are willing and comfortable with giving bad news. That's a part of this job, is delivering news that people don't always want to hear or that isn't to their advantage. And so being able to convey that confidently and comfortably is something that you're going to want to look for. You also want somebody to understand the financing. If they get the numbers, if they're keeping your budget in mind like it's theirs, then that's definitely a green flag. And then you also want their style to match yours. So if you're analytical, you want an analytical person working with you as well. So if you are not local to the Houston area and you are wanting to purchase here, the good news is that you do not have to go it alone. I've advised people from all over the country, and each of those advising started from a one-on-one conversation. And so what we do in that one-on-one is we go over your goals and what it is that you're looking to do. We talk about the Houston market, we talk about your financing, and then we put together a plan of action to get you to the next steps, to get you closer to your goals. So there's a link in the description to book that one-on-one call with me. My name is Lexi Sims. I'm a commercial real estate advisor here in Houston, Texas. I'll see you guys in the next video.